first give us a bit of a sneak peek of what that book is about?
Made in Taiwan is a compilation of Taiwanese food, and I really just divided it into themes.
How that's affected your relationship with food, for once as a judge, rather than being judged when you're serving food as a chef.
Just another chapter in a person's life that is inspiring through food.
Depending on what dish you are eating, that tells a different story of Taiwan.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. So, what is your relationship with food? On the one hand, it's a basic need, we eat to survive. On the other, it can be elevated to an art or even serve to build and define one's identity. And it is this flexibility of food and cuisines that we'll be exploring today. And serving as our culinary guides to the world of global cuisines, we welcome journalist, TV host, and writer Clarissa Wei, who joins us from Taipei. And speaking to us from Koh Samui in Thailand, we have chef, restaurateur, writer, and a judge on Top Chef Middle East, Bobby Chinn. Welcome both of you, and thank you very much for being part of the show. I'm going to start with you, Clarissa. Your book, Made in Taiwan, has become a sensation even before it hit the bookshelves. Can you first give us a bit of a sneak peek of what that book is about?
Yeah, so Made in Taiwan is a compilation of Taiwanese food, and I really just divided it into themes. You know, when you come to Taiwan for the first time, the type of genres that you encounter. So we have breakfast food, night market, also beer food, zecao, and also family style. And then I have a whole chapter on Tainan, which is the culinary capital of Taiwan. So as much as possible, I hope for it to be a comprehensive overlook of what Taiwanese food is like today in modern Taiwan.
Right, Bobby, you've evolved in so many different ways throughout your profession as a chef, and your latest incarnation was as a judge on Top Chef Middle East, isn't that right?
That's right. I'm a work in progress. I'm not in denial. Yeah.
We all are, Bobby. We all are. Can you tell us about how that's affected your relationship with food, for once as a judge, rather than being judged when you're serving food as a chef?
It's a hard job. You know, when you're born as an Egyptian Chinese, you know, you didn't really fit in the holes, and people were very critical of me. Chinese were critical of me. Egyptians were critical of me. It's like, you know, I didn't really fit in anywhere. And so to do this job and to be critical of people that are doing something that it's like a profession that you do, it's a labor of love. So to criticize somebody for what they're doing is really, really hard. But I definitely wanted to test the boundaries and practice my Arabic and do the show, and that brought me into that whole genre of television. That is not something I've never really done before. And to understand the cuisine, you got to eat it. It's not like you can read about it. You got to actually go experience it. And so that just opened a whole new world for me, you know, because my understanding of the cuisine was quite limited. Even though, like, I traveled and did all those shows in the Middle East, this was absolutely, you know, more detailed, and it's been something that I feel really proud about, because it takes me back to my roots. That I'm going back to my mother's homeland and spending much more time there. So all of that was just like, you know, it's just another chapter in a person's life that is inspiring through food.
Now, Clarissa, speaking of going back to your roots, your book originally was an idea you had for a while, but not that long ago it was a hard sell. So what changed? I mean, it's now running out and even pre-orders before it gets to the shelves.
I mean, what changed was we've had more tensions in China, which has created more tensions in between China and Taiwan, which has created this awareness of what Taiwan even is and the sense of urgency. And also what helped was in 2020, around 2021, there was this Stop Asian Hate movement in the United States as well, which also, you know, helped bring to light how important it is to tell stories of Asian people by people here in Asia.
Right. So, Bobby, another project that you're doing, and you know, perhaps going parallel with Clarissa in the sense of trying to bring the Taiwanese identity out onto the international stage. You have lined up the Egyptian Food Fair in Hong Kong.
Well, I think that when we think of Egypt, we think of the pyramids. We think of this ancient culture that did incredible things that they still haven't been able to figure out, how they built it and all that stuff. And what we were really talking about is the ancient Egyptians learned how to manage agriculture. And I think that is one of the most important parts of what I really want to talk about, because today we are dictating agriculture, and it's causing climate change, and it's not really sustainable. And so I wanted to tell the story of Egyptian cuisine through pharaonic cuisine. So the pharaohs were the first to domesticate migratory birds, foie gras, as an example. It was written on the walls of Karnak. So they had discovered migratory birds and they were feeding them figs to get a larger liver. We don't know what they cooked. We know what they farmed. So it's up to interpretation. But then the food was actually influenced also by Africa. It was influenced by the Greeks, the Romans, the Ottoman Empire, the Levant region. And so all these cuisines have come in to the extent that when we talk about Egyptian cuisine, it's lost a lot of its culinary identity towards the Ottoman Empire. So we see a lot of the same dishes throughout the region. And just like in Chinese cuisine, it's like, okay, this could be a stir-fried chicken, but there's many interpretations of it. Whether it's hummus or falafel, there are the interpretations of it. So some of the dishes that I'll be doing is kind of like, we just associate it as being Egyptian, but it's from Turkish descent, from the Levant region. A lot of the chefs that were cooking during the Ottoman period were chefs from Syria and Iran. So there was a lot of that influence. And then I'm taking some old dishes, new modern dishes that were created during Lent. So there's the kushari, vegetarian dishes. And a lot of the dishes that I really were pushing for was more of a plant-based diet because, as you know, cows emit or livestock emit a lot of methane gas. It's destroying our forest. It's poisoning our waters. It's acidifying our oceans or runoff. And so this is kind of like maybe we should look back at our past and be eating, more nutritious food, farm to table. And that's exactly what the ancient Egyptians did.
Right. And Clarissa, taking from some of what Bobby said, and I want to talk about, the whole evolution of food a little bit later and trying to keep it in line with the environment, changing environment that we're living in. But going back to the idea of different influences in food and shaping, a cuisine, what has your book found has shaped Taiwanese food? What has made Taiwanese food what it is?
So many different waves of influences. So the first primarily, obviously, is the Chinese who came. They started coming in a little bit in the 16th century, but by the 18th century, the number of Chinese settlers here outnumbered the indigenous people. And then we also had the Dutch, who were the ones who hired them to be fishermen and farmers here in Taiwan. And they brought over their techniques of, braising pork. They grew rice. They started aquaculture farms, very primitive versions. And then when the Japanese came over, they monopolized all of our core industries. So today, the way that soy sauce, rice wine, rice vinegar is made in Taiwan is done in the Japanese style. Then we have 1949 when the Chinese nationalists came from China, and then they brought over their techniques from all over China. So then that's when you start to have dishes like beef noodle soup or fried dough sticks, the youtiao or the salbing. And for the first time, really, Taiwanese people started to work with wheat because that's not an ingredient that grows really well here. But because when the Cold War happened, the U.S. started shipping over loads of wheat as a tactic, as a soft power tactic to get Taiwanese people to be anti-communist and pro-democracy. People started to work with wheat more. And then with that influence, we started to have a lot of American dishes. So we have hamburger stands now for breakfast in Taiwan, night market steaks. And then when Taiwan shifted to a democracy in the late 80s, early 90s, then you started to see another shift again where people started to think of Taiwanese food as its own entity and something distinct apart from that of Chinese food. So all of these different periods of history have really shaped what our food is like today. And depending on what dish you are eating, that tells a different story of Taiwan, and it goes back, it's like a flashback to a different era.
Right, and speaking of defining a food, there are some countries where, like, you know, Italy or France, which rely on their famous cuisines to expand their cultural influences and attract tourists. But Taiwan, though, and I'm learning so much from this, is internationally famous for completely different reasons. So does it have to be like this way? Lillian Lin is one of the founders of Yunhai Pantry. It's a food shop selling Taiwanese food products in New York. And this is what she had to say about building Taiwan's food brand.
The Taiwanese community here in the U.S. have done a lot of great things, and Taiwan has exported a lot of great things too. You know, we make semiconductor, we make chips, we make great bicycles that are everywhere, but no one has really tried to market Taiwan explicitly through these items. And I think food also hasn't really been a focal area yet either. You know, it's interesting for countries like Italy, for example, the Italian government, like their consulate office in New York, has a person dedicated to promoting Italian food. We don't have that, probably don't have the resources yet, and it just hasn't really been a key focus. And so now, you know, there's kind of a wave of Taiwanese food and Asian American food, and so we can really kind of ride that wave and share more Taiwanese food with people.
Bobby, you saw how, with your experience in Vietnam, you saw how suddenly Indochine food could travel and become a very, on many menus across the world. And then you're trying to do the same with Egyptian food, especially in this part of the world. What is it that can make a cuisine travel, you think?
Well, I think it's like you have to have the ingredients. I mean, I think the reason why Asian food or Chinese food or even Thai food traveled very well is that, you know, it's condiment cooking. You have oyster sauce, you have black beans, you have chili, you got the vinegar, you got the Shaoxing wine, and then you can make literally a lot of different things with those ingredients, changing the ratios. So I think condiment cooking is critical. It's the same with like Thai cuisine. Thai cuisine traveled very well. And I think the government had a lot to do with it. I mean, if you even think of like the idea of pad Thai, of creating an international competition, a competition to get people to eat rice noodles and to create a dish out of that was, you know, pad Thai was invented in the 1950s, I believe. You know, that type of things. I think that the same thing applies for Vietnam. So Vietnam, nobody knew Vietnamese cuisine, which is part of the reason why I went there. Is that the reason why people don't know Vietnamese cuisine is the Americans had an embargo on the country for 25 years. And we knew nothing about the culture. And, you know, I went to a bookstore to look for Vietnamese, you know, book on Vietnamese cuisine. There was nothing written on it, except for, I think, a French couple. You know, they were fighting wars for 1,000 years. So now all of a sudden, people are now paying attention that you have a cuisine that was influenced by both the French, the Chinese, the spice trade, probably the Cham people, creating a cuisine uniquely different from the rest of Southeast Asian, which is actually a modern cuisine perfected thousands of years ago, which is literally gluten-free, healthy, low-fat, raw, and ridiculously tasty and easy to prepare. So I think that that it's easier once you have those ingredients.
Clarissa, and the whole idea of ingredients, I think one of the things you tried to do with your book is stay authentic to the Taiwanese ingredients that are used in the cooking and the food recipes. But I first need to ask you, as you grew up with Taiwanese food in the US, how different was that from what your book is now putting together in its recipes?
Quite different, because we didn't have access to a lot of the pantry items that we have here in Taiwan. When people like my parents, you know, immigrated to the States, they couldn't find Taiwanese rice wine or Taiwanese soy sauce. So they just went with, you know, Hong Kong soy sauce or Chinese rice wine and condiments. And it was good enough. It was an approximation. But as any chef will tell you, sometimes, you know, like a specific type of rice wine will really make or break a dish. Taiwanese rice wine is more similar to cooking sake than it is to Shaoxing wines. So growing up in the States, my parents cooked with what we could get at the Asian grocery store, which was primarily a lot of Chinese ingredients, but with time now we have more Taiwanese pantry items. And I think what Lillian and them at Yunhai are doing, they're bringing in more awareness of what ingredients we actually use here in Taiwan. And again, this was not possible a couple decades ago because people conflated the two cuisines and the ingredients that were used. So thankfully, there's, like Lillian said, we're just riding this wave. There's more awareness of the ingredients that we use here in Taiwan, and it's so important. And I have focused a lot on this in my book to really figure out what the building blocks of a cuisine is, what condiments you use, how they're made, to really understand how to build a flavor.
Well, I think that also regardless of those ingredients, you even brought the same ingredients that you had in Taiwan. There's something about like Italian food never tastes like Italian food back in Rome or Italy. It's the terroir. And I think it's that, like eating a beef noodle soup on a plastic stool, on a busy Taiwan street, I don't know, it's magical. You can have it and it tastes great in, say, LA, San Francisco, New York, but having it at the root, and I think that's part of the other thing, is that we should always go back to the root to understand the actual nuance that we can never replicate, by being outside. You know what I'm saying? It's like I can eat Vietnamese food. It's like if people come to Vietnam, I was like, go eat on the streets because you'll never eat that food like the person that's making it for 3 generations. Impossible to replicate. It's the same thing with the Egyptian food. What we're going to do is going to be the best version we can do, but when it's right there at the roots, there's something magical about that can never be replicated. That's why you have there's a UN, there's a food arm, food tourism, because that food is so important in that sense.
Right. Context is everything, too. And when I was interviewing a lot of these vendors, they'll use a braising liquid they have been using for generations. So obviously you can't replicate that in the States or at home. You really have to be there.
Right. And that's where I want to jump in about street food. How much has street food, or how much of your book is about street food or the recipes that are born out of street food?
Yeah, I have a chapter about night markets, but actually I don't think night markets and street food are as big as they were, say, in the 90s or late 80s. And that's because, as a country develops, people don't want to just be working outside in a small little stall anymore. They want to move into the brick and mortar. And I think as an American, we have this romanticization of, the small hawker stall that's been doing the same thing for generations. But every time I talk to these people, they're like, why can't we move up? Why can't we have chain stores? Why can't we have air conditioning? And I think that's a very valid desire as well. And I've seen that with a lot of the street vendors here who've done really well. They're starting, if they've done well enough that their second, third generation has taken over, that second, third generation wants them to move in an air conditioning brick and mortar. And I think that's a natural evolution. And I think it's a good thing that vendors don't want to be on the street forever.
And your take on this, Bobby, the whole idea of street food being an authentic reflection. For instance, if I go to India, you haven't been to India unless you eat from the food stalls on the streets. Is that correct in as far as really experiencing a place and its cuisine?
I believe so. I believe that that's the fast track to understanding a culture. What are they eating? Where do they eat? How much do they spend on their food? It gives you a really an immediate pulse on what's going on in the culinary world, I believe. There are street cultures. Vietnam is an example of a street culture. Everything was done on the street. You get a haircut on the street. The guys will refill your lighter fluid on the street. It's you eat on the streets, and it is the culture. Egypt was the same. I think that eating on the streets is I like the idea of sitting next to a very poor person eating a humble dish next to a person that's extremely wealthy, just jumped out of a Bentley. I think that's kind of exciting that this food brings us together regardless of our income. But we like the flavor, the comfort, what it meant to us as children, or how we were introduced to the dish, all of that. So you also have validation. You now have Michelin stars for some of these places. Street food is so honest. You're not buying ambiance, right? You're buying, a well-executed dish. So I enjoy that much more than like, say, a molecular experience with foam and tweezers and all that stuff. I've done that. But I can eat sushi and haute cuisine anywhere in the world, but I can't eat necessarily like a really different type of beef noodle soup, say in Taiwan, to a pho, pho bo in Vietnam, or the various types of dishes that for the same dish but made by different cultures. I think that that authenticity, that honesty, is imperative for our culinary heritage, I guess.
Right, and if we want, again, we go back to this idea of kind of food representing a nation. Do you think Taiwanese food is well represented internationally, Clarissa?
I think right now it's quite limited, but with, a lot of the people you guys have shown already with Good to Eat dumplings, with Win Sun Bakery with Yunhai, what they're doing is they're sort of broadening that narrative. But when I was growing up in Los Angeles, the menu items of Taiwanese restaurants were quite limited, and they were sort of focused on the food of post-1949 in Taiwan. So more of the food that the Chinese refugees had brought over. So like beef noodle soup, maybe some dumplings, fan tuan, youtiao, which is all great and all very, loved here in Taiwan. But we weren't seeing a lot of dishes that, say, came 200 years ago, like oyster omelet or the rice puddings or even braised pork over rice. So now, again, there's this wave and more people are interested in what Taiwanese food has to offer, and there are more restaurateurs sort of pushing out more diverse dishes, which is exciting to see.
Yeah, and it's really exciting and interesting to see how now people are using food for diplomacy, and it's being better understood that food can connect people and cultures together. But we're coming to the end of the show. There's so much more to talk about. Before we go, there's one element of Taiwanese food culture we want to highlight, and that's the night market. We've been talking about street foods. These markets serve up hot food, entertainment, and all kinds of knickknacks late into the night. They're as much dinner venues as they are hangouts for locals and visitors alike. We asked our friendly neighborhood rapper Anders Saucy to take us on a tour and show us some of his favorite things. Take a look.
The Taiwanese night market, a place where flavors collide, cultures converge, and memories are made. Hey everybody, it's Anderson, aka Anders Saucy, and I'd like to welcome you all through a journey of Taipei's very own Rauhe Night Market. Tonight, we're gonna get some delicious food. Whether you're looking for some dinner options or you're a night owl looking for a midnight snack, this is the place to be. You can try some of the hit classics like oyster omelet, a mixture of egg, oysters, and savory sauce, or stinky tofu. Yes, that's really what it's called, but trust me, it's pretty darn good. In fact, I'm definitely gonna have some tonight. Let's see what else is on the menu. Scallion pancake for 50 NT? Oh, that looks so good. Thank you. Check that out. You wish you could smell this right now. That's so good. My danger zone, it's like really easy to gain weight here. Let me teach you a phrase in Mandarin. 边走边吃. It means to eat while you walk. In other words, get your food to go, because that's how we do it in a Taiwanese night market. Hey, if you ever want to take a break from your 边走边吃, you can also find a place to sit and eat, just like I'm doing this right now with this shaved ice. And if you want to take a break from eating food, you can also play some games, win some prizes, like I just did now with this funny music guitar. Check it out. Saucy.
喂，有空吗？我有一点肚子饿。I'm thinking about going to the 夜市。Are you down? Sweet. See you in 10 minutes.
Yo, it's late in the evening, you're leaning towards going out to get some grub. Well, a night market is sure to hit the spot, so meet me at the MRT stop. Delicious aromas coming from the kitchens. Is that new way? No way! Fried chicken, pepper pork buns, Taiwanese sausage. Guabao, I should come here more often. I might step outside of my comfort zone. Ice cream burrito with cilantro, no cone. I see grilled squid, the big ones too. Sticky tofu? Why don't mind if I do? Scallion pancakes, oyster omelet. Don't make me choose a favorite man that's begging for conflict. Dessert that's sweet, oh, you know me. Mango shaved ice and I add red bean. I'm bending over backwards for a cup of boba. There's so much to order, gonna get a food coma. Wait, are those donuts? And this is called a nutritious sandwich? At a night market, there's always something to do. Grab food, play a round of dart balloons. Going around looking for something to chew on, and it's so affordable, you don't even need a coupon. There's culinary art in the heart of the Taiwanese night market. So take out your map and mark it. I'm gonna go ahead and get started, y'all. Peace. So to sum it all up, the Taiwanese night market is more than just food. It's a cultural experience. Remember that. Well, this is all the time I have for you today. My name is Anders Sasi. 谢谢你的观看. I don't know.
Well, if you want to listen to that song again or watch any of the other videos from our contributors, visit our website and YouTube channels. And with that, we've arrived at the end of our 12-course culinary journey through the world's food culture. A huge thank you to both my guests, Bobby Chinn, speaking to us from Koh Samui in Thailand, thank you, and Clarissa Wei in Taipei for us. Thank you both very much for your time and your insight. And to our audience, as always, it's been great to have your company. Goodbye and stay connected.